Hello, this is Tom and Chris. We're those film guys, and today we're going to be discussing the epic conclusion of Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy in The Dark Knight Rises. And to start off, we will be going into spoilers, but to start with, we'll give an overall generalization of what we thought of the film. So when it gets to the spoiler territory, if you haven't seen the film, I do urge you to switch off, go and see it, then come back for it. We will give you a prompt when we have finished the general sort of analysis of it, our general thoughts. So we will warn you beforehand, and this is a warning before that. So, The Dark Knight Rises.
Yes.
I thought it was terrific. An absolutely fantastic ending. And it was all I could have hoped for and more from Christopher Nolan. It looks fantastic. It sounds great. And there are points I want to cover in the cinematography. Wally Pfister is perhaps one of the best cinematographers alive and working today. He does a fantastic job, and it seems to me everyone is pulling out all the stops for this film. Christian Bale cements his place as one of my favourite actors working today, with perhaps the best portrayal he's done of Bruce Wayne. And everyone just gives their all, and I think it works brilliantly from beginning to end, and it has a great set piece moments and great set pieces throughout, and I think it all works.
In my opinion, I'm sorry, I'm not being the fanboy of Nolan on this one. I really didn't think this one was very good. It had so many problems and plot holes that, yes, the other ones had problems too, but they were very few and far between. This one, it was just a mess. The whole plot was just a mess throughout, from beginning to end. And they say this is the epic conclusion to Batman. The ending was just terrible. Like, that was the worst possible ending they could do. Now, I will say that this is probably Christian Bale's strongest performance out of the three films for what he's on screen. Honestly, Batman in costume is hardly in this film. He's in about 3 scenes, and that to me really hurts the film, because you're just kind of jumping through hoops until Batman appears on screen. I thought Tom Hardy as Bane was pretty good, apart from the voice. The voice seemed a bit hokey in parts. Anne Hathaway, to me, steals the show as, Catwoman, Selina Kyle. And, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Michael Caine were brilliant also. But other than that, all the performances were strong. But to me, it seemed more plot over character in this one compared to the other two. And I love the other two. If you've seen our reviews of Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, I think those were up there in the best superhero films ever made. And where I think this film goes wrong is that in The Dark Knight, the ethical and moral commentary was in the subtext of the film. Like, if you looked into it really deeply, you could find it. In here, the whole plot is based around this thing, and it just kind of hits you over the head with it, and it's not subtly done in any way. And the symbolism in the I came out of this film severely disappointed.
See, I was completely different. I thought that you said about the subtext. Yes, there is. You could pick the previous 2 films apart to find the sort of depth of it, but I very much think the ideas were put to the forefront, and that is what I think this does well. I think the ideas are clear, and you can analyse it for more depth. And I think that in terms of the actors, all of them are very good. I think the strongest two are Christian Bale, Anne Hathaway, and of course, and I have to give a mention to Michael Caine. And I have to stress, I am not a Michael Caine fan. I think he's in other roles he's very monotone, but here he sort of he convinced me that he is an actor, and he is essentially the emotional heart of the story. And I think that, you know, I think that this is the direction they had to go with it. I couldn't have pictured anything else for a conclusion for it, and the climax, I couldn't see any other way of getting around that, of getting into that position. That it seemed natural to get to where that conclusion went. And I think as well, the score, Hans Zimmer perhaps does probably the best of the three, and that's debatable. But I think it's the best soundtrack of the three. It uses the same cues and themes from the previous two, but amps them up, makes them more grand for this conclusion. And what else can I say? I came out thinking that was 3 and a quarter hours. If it was that long, I came out thinking that was 2 and a quarter hours of my life well spent. That did not feel like 2 and a quarter hour movie, and I came out absolutely loving it.
Right, sorry, go on. But
this is not a problem with the film. This is not a problem I have with the film. This is a problem I have with people that went to see it. See, I went on my own. I decided half hour before the screening to go and see it opening day. When I came out, these two kids came out and they started spoiling the movie for people that were going in. Like, not spoiling it directly to them, but talking to their friends about it who were going into the film and basically spoiling it. Don't give away any plot details. I mean, we're doing it, but we're warning you first. But that I find is just no, and it's not like the other two. It is not for children. It is not a kids' movie.
Yeah, it's very adult in this. Not like from the content, just in terms of the tone and the pacing of it. Like there are a lot of exposition scenes in this film. Like the whole second act is pretty much exposition and talking. And for a superhero action film, there really isn't that much action in it. Just going back to some of your early points. Yet the score, Hans Zimmer, what can you say, Hans Zimmer? Most of it is pretty much identical to the Batman Begins and Dark Knight soundtrack, but for the new cues that there are, like, I really like, off the soundtrack, Mind If I Cut In, which is Catwoman's theme. I think the chant works in the film. The Bane's theme. So yeah, I can't fault the score. And also going back to your comment about Michael Caine, him being the heart of the film, and the other films, yes, he is the heart of the film, and I will acknowledge that his scenes are probably the best in the film, and certainly the most emotional in the film. But he just kind of disappears after like quarter of the way through the film, and we don't see him again until the very end, and you lose that element of character. I know he wasn't a particularly main character in the other Batman films, but he was always there, and he gave a nice bit of, comic relief or advice to Bruce, and it was just kind of moments like that I just felt were lacking in this film, and it seemed too central on plot, this one, and not central on characters. There's many characters that just get dropped in the second act of this film, and then come back at the end, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember those characters. They they've been out for it for a long time. And I actually saw this film a second time, and on second viewing, you can really tell the lapse in the second act of the film. In terms, like, for example, Catwoman, her character doesn't turn up to the very end. You just kind of drop all of these characters, and Bane disappears for half the film. And as I say, in a Batman film, he's hardly in it, and Bruce Wayne as well. Like, they do well in the first act. It's just the second act, and that being the biggest act of the film. And one of the most striking things in this film, I think, which stands testament to why I didn't like it, is there's a placement of a scene in this film that comes really early on that I thought would take place at the end. And due to that placement of that scene, I completely lost all investment in this film, and I was just watching action on a screen, whereas the other ones I was invested in the characters. The final 10-minute action scene turns into a CGI fest, and I was just looking at my watch, and I just didn't care. It felt like a 2-hour film dragged out to 2 hours 45 minutes, and you know it's such a letdown that you go from two amazing films and it resorts to the typical third part of a trilogy usually being the weakest. And I was so looking forward to this film, and I was really disappointed by it.
Going back to that Michael Caine point, I think that's necessary. You spoke about him, not being in it much. I think that was necessary in terms of character, and I do think that I would say that I don't think this is at all follows the cliche of the third film is the weakest or the worst, because I think this is a very good, very solid piece of work, and I think that it wraps everything up nicely, and it's thoroughly enjoyable to watch on a pure action level. And I would go as far to say it's the perfect trilogy.
No, I would not go that far. Like, again, on the Alfred point, he was the audience. He was, us. He was how we perceived everything, and he was the heart of the film. And to lose the heart of the film, it just... I'll tell you what. When I saw the other film, Dark Knight, people were clapping in the middle of it. They were laughing. They were engaged in it. This one, complete silence all the way through. And this is a very humourless movie compared to the other two. It's a lot more bleaker in tone, and people could praise that, but even so, I've seen bleak films where people are engaged in it, and considering it's the legend ends. As soon as this film ended, when I went to see Avengers, everyone sat through the credits and was still really pumped, even after it had finished. This one, everyone just got up and left as soon as the film ended, in complete silence. And that's what it felt like to me. People were just sitting through this film, not engaged in it, and just passively watching it, whereas the other films you can watch, you can analyse as you go through it, you can engage with. And this one just seemed really bogged down with a lot of inconsistencies and plot holes, and as I say, loads of characters were just dropped in it, and it seemed too central on plot, and I think the ending tied it up almost too tightly. I mean, obviously we'll get into spoilers in a little while, and we'll eventually get to that, but I don't know, it wasn't the ending I was hoping for. It really wasn't.
Okay, so now we're gonna start, sort of breaking it down bit by bit. So this is where we get spoiler territory. So I urge you, if you haven't seen it, to please stop or come back to this recording once you've seen the film. So with that being said, you have been warned. We are going into spoilers. Don't complain. We warned you.
Yeah.
Right. Here we go. So, let's begin where the film begins. We begin with a Bruce Wayne who, you know, has hung up his cloak, or hung up the cape as Batman. He has disappeared. Batman has disappeared. After the police tried to chase him at the end of the second film, he vanished. And Bruce is now in a state of self-imposed exile, where, you know, this is all testament to his character at the beginning of the film, where he has not, even though he's hung up his cape, and this is something Alfred points out, he has not left. He's stuck in limbo. He can't escape from Batman, and he can't escape from the death of Rachel and the death of Harvey Dent, and this lie that the peace in Gotham's been built on. He can't escape that, and he's shut himself into his house, not seeing anyone, and possibly blowing his money on stuff that he doesn't need, or projects that fail. And he seems to be in this lapse of not really doing anything, and sort of in a rut of, I'd almost say, a depressed state. And I thought that was a brilliant way to open in terms of character, having him sort of in that state, and Alfred trying desperately to tell him to move on, and to, I think he says, and there's a great moment in there which is sort of, we'll come back to the beginning, but I just want to skip ahead for this one little bit, where he says something along the lines of, when he first disappeared in the first film for 7 years, he would go to a cafe in somewhere in France. Yeah, and he would sit there, order the same thing every year, and look at everyone and see if Bruce was there, had moved on. That is all Alfred wants, and that is a great testament to that opening in general, and the characters in that opening, and you know, that is all Alfred wants for him. But Bruce is stuck in this rut, and he can't get out of it, or he doesn't feel he can. He doesn't want to move on. That's what it feels like, and I think Bale does a damn good job of portraying that sort of emotion in that character.
Okay, now, what I thought, I felt like I'd severely missed something at the beginning of this film. I mean, it opens up and we get, I don't know whether it actually was extra footage that they shot for The Dark Knight, but it goes back to, I think, the funeral of Harvey Dent at the ending montage of The Dark Knight, and it shows Commissioner Gordon's guilt for lying about Harvey Dent, and that he actually tried to kill his son. And yeah, I really didn't like this aspect of Bruce Wayne. I mean, Batman never gives up. So as soon as the Harvey Dent, everyone remembered him, crime just stopped in Gotham. Like, everything just stopped all of a sudden just because of this one act. Crime immediately stopped straight after this was said at this conference. I just didn't buy that. And did Christian Bale give up straight away after the events of The Dark Knight? And if so, why is he walking with a cane? I mean, I know it's 8 years after The Dark Knight, and I thought maybe he'd continued after The Dark Knight, but he'd been beaten up since that 8 years. But apparently no, he gave up straight away. After he drove away in that motorbike at the end, he went back to his home, and he completely gave up being Batman and became a hermit. And I don't know whether I could buy that aspect of the character. I don't see him jumping to that conclusion. Now, what I will say is, I do like what you said about Alfred wanting him to stop and to give up this dream of going out and being Batman again, because he wants him to move on with his life and be happy. I did like that aspect. But I just didn't see Christian Bale as a hermit, and I didn't like that aspect of the character at the start.
You know, and another thing, I for one think that it's sort of the way the story had to go with, in terms of him sort of, not necessarily, but just because at the end, Batman becomes, at the end of The Dark Knight, Batman becomes the villain. He echoes the Harvey Dent's line, you either die here or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And he now becomes the villain so that Gotham can thrive on Harvey Dent's sort of legacy, his symbol. And he feels that that Gotham doesn't need Batman because of this this symbol that is still essentially a lie, but he doesn't feel that he needs to be Batman because, you know, this symbol of Harvey is what Gotham really needs. And Gordon, and Jim Gordon is you know, you can tell he is just, you know, he has weights on his shoulders from this lie, and he wants to get it out in the open. And you see him at the beginning with a speech that he doesn't read, but that comes in later on, and that basically tells the truth of what Harvey Dent did, but he can't bring himself to read it. He's conflicted by what Harvey Dent has done to his family and what Harvey Dent means to the city. And I thought that shone through, and I thought that was a great bit, sort of great character sort of arc, or the beginnings of a great character arc. And
from there, I guess the film kind of moves on to we get our first glimpse of Anne Hathaway. I think Bruce Wayne's throwing some kind of charity ball, and we get our first shot of Anne Hathaway, and she was brilliant in this film. Before I went into this film, I wasn't sure that she'd top Michelle Pfeiffer, but wow, they're completely different. But I think she brought a much more realistic cat burglar aspect to the role, and I love that dynamic she had with Christian Bale, the whole back and forth, and her like conniving with people and manipulating them, lulling them into a false sense of security, and then striking back. I really like that aspect of her character. And so from there, what happens is she sneaks into Bruce Wayne's apartment and cracks this safe that was meant to be uncrackable, and I believe she dusts for his fingerprints because she needs to deliver these to Daggett, who in turn will give them to Bane, I believe.
Yeah. And Anne Hathaway is fantastic in it, and she has this arc to start with where she is very much sort of, the rich are bad and the poor are good. That's a very simplistic version of it, but that is sort of where it all stems from. And she has a great character arc where which we'll sort of go into, but at the start she is very cocky, she's confident in herself, she knows what she's doing, and you know, she is struggling. She is not struggling, she is trying to thrive on a city that is essentially crime free. And I think that's very, it's written very well, those character elements, and I thought Nolan did a good job in incorporating those sorts of ideas into his characters.
Yeah, I like, as I said, I liked Selina Kyle in this film, but I think her motives, especially towards the second act, third act, kind of fell apart at the seams. I didn't see that her character was very consistent from how it was at the start. At the start, I really liked her character, and in fact, considering it's a Batman film, I found myself looking forward to her scenes more. Like, as soon as one of her scenes finished, I was like, oh, you know, I want to see the next scene with her in. Because she does play up this kind of like whole different personas. Like, there's this great scene where, we'll get into it in a minute, where the police barge in, and she pretends that she's a hostage in there, and she's like crying and going hysterical, and then as soon as the police pass her, she turns back to her, you know, usual seductive self, and then just, you know, leaves the room. She'd like evaded police capture, and I thought that aspect of the character is completely like straight from the comic book. And in fact, this one did feel more like a comic book film compared to the other ones. In, you know, there's some famous scenes from other comics such as Nightfall and you know, No Man's Land, which come up later on in the film. And it's about around this time as well that we learned that Bruce Wayne has been very lazy with his money and his company, and Wayne Enterprises kind of like fell into disrepair. And we get introduced to this character called Miranda Tate, played by Marion Cotillard, and she's trying to push forward this operation for clean, renewable source of energy in Gotham. And you know, her character, there's a relationship with her character. Like, Bruce Wayne absconds with her for like one night, and then this is never brought up again. And I didn't buy the relationship or that dynamic with the character. In fact, her character seemed kind of boring.
But there's something I want to bring up in terms of a revelation that happens regarding that I want to get into, and what I feel about it. Like, I mean, shall I give it now?
We'll build up to it, but
wait?
Just bearing in mind, like, I will just say this, that before this film came out, there were a lot of theories thrown out about two certain characters in it, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Marion Cotillard, and I'm just going to come out right and say it, that they're true. Like, as soon as I saw Miranda Tate in, I knew that there'd be more to her and who she was going to turn out to be by the end, but we'll come to that at the end. So you want to talk about John Blake's character and his backstory about that? He was probably sort of probably, in my opinion, the sort of unsung character. Like, I thought he was a very good character. Yeah. In terms of his idealism. He's very idealistic and still believes in Batman, even though everyone else has made him out to be the villain. He still very much believes in the symbol of Batman, and you know, he very much looks up to Gordon as well, which as sort of the principle of what he must strive to in order to be a good police officer. And I think that, you know, his motivations and his idealism comes through and is very good. And I think that in terms of his involvement, also he's sort of sometimes in the background, but sometimes he gets his own character moment. And you know, I really liked John Blake. I liked pretty much all the characters in this. Yeah, John Blake, I thought, was probably one of the strongest Joseph Gordon-Levitt's performance was probably one of the strongest in the film, and certainly for a fictional character, I think they did give him a lot of a lot of backstory, and it worked. Probably gets more screen time than Bruce Wayne and Batman, to be honest, especially during the second act. He seems to be the central focus of the plot, and while I'm not a big fan of that, I still think that Bruce Wayne isn't at the forefront as what he should be in this film. I do think that Gordon-Levitt did bring a very good, extra character, extra dynamic to the film. He it's said that he's an orphan, so you have that that parallel between Bruce Wayne, and they state at the start that the funds of Wayne Enterprises has no longer gone towards help funding and maintaining this this home for orphan children, orphan boys, and that plays into it as well. And at this point, Blake has already worked out that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Like, no one else has, apart from the people who Bruce Wayne confided in. But this person knew who he is, so again that adds another element to the character.
I'd just like to sort of say about the way he finds out he's Bruce Wayne. And actually, I was pretty convinced by the way in which he knows Bruce Wayne is Batman. He says it's the way he looks, the front he puts on. He can see the front or the persona that Bruce is trying to put forward to other people, because he says that's what I've done, or that's what I used to do. So that's how he can tell that he's sort of got an extra dimension to him. And I was convinced by that. I didn't think that was sort of thrown out there. I thought that was I found it a good reason, and a very convincing reason.
To me, the first act of this film was by far the strongest. It seemed to focus more on the emotional side of Bruce Wayne with these these new characters, and that is probably one of the strongest scenes in the film. That conversation where Blake is saying that his parents were killed, and he has for years not been able to deal with his anger towards it, but since then he's knew that you just have to move on, which is what Bruce Wayne's had to do, and he can empathise with this aspect of Bruce Wayne. Now from here we should probably talk about Bane. There's one of the first scenes in the film is this big action sequence involving two planes, and we get our first look at Bane. And what did you think of this scene? There's
the scene itself, I thought was a great opening set piece and an action, and cements Nolan's sort of use of visual effects over CGI. It was a very, it was very good, and it had, and I sort of looked at the FBI guy in it, and and it's Peter Baelish
from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and I thought he would just sort of connive with Bane and in that moment, but the first glimpse of Bane, I actually thought it was quite a good introduction, and he's going to lengths to get to someone that he's put his life on the line to get to, someone who he can use to cement a message to Gotham City in the later part of the film. I found him to be very intimidating, and I thought this was a sort of a great introduction to his physical strength as well, and the physical presence he has, because he's very much very physical in his performance, Tom Hardy, and that physicality is intimidating, and that's what makes the character. His physicality and his strength and the way he portrays himself on screen. He is a very different villain to the Joker, who is very sort of methodical, sort of thinks. He's the thinker. Bane is both, but there is an emphasis on his physicality, and I think that is Batman hasn't met his match physically yet, and I thought Bane was rather good, and I thought he looked rather good, and he was played rather well, and I thought this was a great introduction to him.
Okay, now this of course was the scene that was released as the prologue, which was released a good few months ago. As an action scene, it was okay. Again, I applaud the the stuntmen as well in this. Like it's all done with practical effects in midair. No use of CGI as of yet in the film. But yeah, I thought it was a good reveal for Bane. However, one thing I will say, the voice. And, in test screenings when they first showed the prologue, people complained that they couldn't hear what Bane was saying, and I too really struggled. It literally sounded like how they would have filmed it on set, with him talking from behind this mask. And it sounded very muffled, and especially when the plane's in midair and the doors are ripped off and you've got the air rushing in, it was almost impossible to hear what he was saying. It's been noticeably changed in post-production, and I'm not sure whether it works. He kind of sound. I will say, when I saw this, to me, he did sound like a kind of posh British Sean Connery-esque voice, and that kind of threw me off the whole sense of being intimidated by the character. He's got this mask on, but they seem to have put this filter over his voice that makes him sound like he's got like a kind of microphone embedded in this mask, and it seems too loud and almost too clear compared to everyone else in the situation. But Tom Hardy was good in the role. He brought a very physical element to it, as you said, and what he does with his all he can really act with in this film is with his eyes, and the expressions he gives with his eyes, considering that the mask takes up about 3/4 of his face. And there are some times where he is genuinely frightening, but obviously you have to draw parallels, and you raise the spectre of the Joker from Dark Knight, and I know they're different villains, but going from the Joker to this, I didn't get his motives in place in this film. It seemed like his stake in things was really kind of murky and not well defined, whereas the Joker was anarchy. He wanted to test Batman mentally. Here, I'm not so sure what his intention was. It seemed very, not consistent. I
thought that you have the Joker, who is anarchy and chaos and wants to cause chaos. And Bane, I found, was involved in complete destruction. Like, whereas I'm going, like, someone else said that the Joker saw Batman as a type of plaything, sort of the person who he can test mentally and who he can manipulate, whereas Bane sort of doesn't see him that way and just sees him as an obstacle that must be destroyed. And I thought that was great. You move from one end of the spectrum to the other, from chaos to complete destruction. And I thought it worked.
But even the complete destruction aspect kind of is changed and altered in the second act of this film. Because he destroys some things, but his intention isn't to destroy. Or is it? We'll get into this later, but Right now, after we've established Bane, there's oh, and going back to Miranda Tate's clean energy project, I just looked at this thing and I was like, I did exactly what I did when I went to see The Amazing Spider-Man. I just saw this device and just went, doomsday weapon, bomb, it will explode. So right from there I was like, there seemed to be a bit too much foreshadowing in this film. Like the whole sonar thing in The Dark Knight I thought was just going to be used for the whole Lao in Hong Kong scene, but obviously that came back later on in the film. But here, it's forced. The whole, it even looks like a bomb, even as a generator for energy. I just stared at this thing and I was like, ugh. We're going the typical doomsday weapon route for this, aren't we? And then, moving on the plot a bit, Gordon hears that there's this underground operation going on and people are being murdered and going missing in the underground of Gotham from the sewers. So he takes a team of police down there to investigate, and they're unsuccessful and they basically all get shot to high hell. And Gordon's kidnapped, and this to me should have been the introduction of Bane. He's kind of sitting there with you know, I know that Tom Hardy put on a lot of muscle mass for this film. He just like turns around, goes to his henchman and just like full on force chokes one. And then he just says to the other one, like, search his body, and then I will kill you too. And I was like, that is perfect. That is the epitome of Bane right there. I mean, these we said this in our thoughts video, these henchmen will gladly die for him, and die for his cause. And, you know, that we haven't seen that element before in any of the other Batman films. Like, the henchmen have always been very dumb, kind of, you know, acting out of fear towards the villain. In this, they will gladly die for this guy.
Yeah. I want to move it back a bit with the bomb thing. Yes, that's foreshadowing, but I didn't find it forced. I think it was brought up before we actually saw it. When that's what Bruce was wasting his money on, and he sort of didn't think it was going to work, so he sort of left it. And I think I didn't find it forced, and I think and moving it forward with the Bane thing, I did really like that, and I thought it was very creepy. And you know, Gordon, he sort of unconscious. He's looking around everywhere, and he sees that this is a piece of foreshadowing as well, where he sees that this is a mass army of people who are led by a man who just doesn't care about his men. He chokes one of them, and he doesn't care. None of them lift a finger. None of them do anything to sort of stop it. They know what they want, and they know how to get that, and you know, they're willing to die for Bane, and that it's a very creepy scene. And you know, it seems to me that Gordon was there sort of going, I hope this doesn't come back and bite us again. But it's very he does sort of have that look of shit.
Before he escapes, Bane takes the speech that we talked about earlier of the truth about Harvey Dent, what Commissioner Gordon wrote, explaining what really happened that night, and about the lie that they all put on. So Bane takes this out of Gordon's jacket pocket and keeps hold of it. And then Gordon escapes by rolling off this platform that he's lying on into the sewer, and he gets shot as he's like coursing down the sewer. But what I thought was really contrived was as well, it shows that that Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, John Blake, is a really honourable character, because when there's this explosion that goes off down the sewers, all the cops are like, screw this, we're not going down there. but he is willing to go down and, help Commissioner Gordon. And no one else does, so he runs off to find another manhole to go down, or to go to the exchange where the sewer water comes out. And he just happens to find Commissioner Gordon on the first one he searches for. And Bane's henchmen explain when Gordon jumps into the water, there are so many sewer exchanges in this city. He could be at any of them. It's impossible to find him. Yep. Joseph Gordon-Levitt manages to find him almost straight away, and that was one. I know I'm nitpicking right now,
right,
but it did seem a bit too easy.
Right, I thought that he went, because that seems to be the same one that he found that body in, of the kid. Of the kid, where he goes to the orphanage to see the guy's brother. You know, the kid that was fished out of the sewer. That seems to be the same one. So I had the thought, and I didn't think it was sort of contrived. I thought that he knew where it was, and he knew that was the closest one to it, and maybe he thought that Gordon would be there, and if he searched, and that was the closest one to the manhole, so that's why I think he went there. And it just I bought
then Commissioner Gordon gets put in the hospital bed, and that's what we saw from the original teaser trailer, where he's in really bad shape. He's got the oxygen mask on. So Bruce is thinking about becoming Batman again, because Selina Kyle has stole his fingerprints from the safe and is, gonna sell them to the highest bidder, Daggett and Bane, because it seems like she's in over her head, and she's in league with a lot of the wrong people, and she's trying to find a way out. That's her stake in it. She wants anonymity. And so Bruce is like, well, I've got to become Batman again so I can find out the truth about these fingerprints and get them back. So, and this kind of annoyed me. He goes to the hospital that Commissioner Gordon's at, and we do get this genuinely funny scene where the surgeon's like, you've got no cartilage in your knees, you've got scarring on your kidneys, you've got severe brain trauma from all the beatings you've taken in the year. He's like, oh, I don't think it's safe for you to do any, extreme sports or anything. And he jumps down to Commissioner Gordon's hospital bed, and Gordon's like, the Batman has to come back. You were gone for 8 years, you have to come back and, fight this new evil that I found. And then, immediately after that, you think, oh, well, now Bruce is going to have to dig deep. He's going to have to fight above his physical injuries to go back out as Batman. But no, we have the plot convenience device 101. He pops on this magic leg knee brace, which cracks his knees back into place, and then he's fine. He can just walk completely and utterly fine. No overcoming anything. Just pops on this and boop, done.
But it seems like that. It seems like I found that I thought he wore that all the time whilst he was fighting, because it helped him to sort of not have as much physical prowess as he did in previous films, but sort of allow him to come back. So I had the thought that he probably wore that underneath his costume, underneath the batsuit.
Yeah, but still, I mean, the guy was walking with a cane at the start of the film and shuffling, and he just pops on this little knee brace, and then he's walking, running, kicking, punching, just doing all these epic martial art moves with Catwoman. And to me, that just seemed like a really easy way out of getting him. It's like, oh crap, it's 40 minutes in, we better have Batman in the film in a minute. Pop this thing on, and then he goes out. It just seemed a really quick, simple solution to me. Alfred's saying, don't go out as Batman. And these scenes, goes back to the scene that you talked about with the whole, when he went on holiday, he was looking over the tables to see if he could find Bruce Wayne, who's settled down with someone, got kids and everything. And that was a really, really nice dynamic, I thought, especially between, Bruce Wayne and Alfred. That's always been like the really emotional parts of all the other films. And I felt that was a nice feature. And then it's around this point anyway. And this is where I start having problems. Bane's motivations. I never thought I'd say this in a Batman film, but Bane attacks the stock exchange. And this is where I'm talking about the whole current affairs issues that are going on in the world. And it's being really heavy-handedly done, and the symbolism is just too much. The stock exchange. Now, obviously, we've gone through times of economic, trouble and turmoil, and the whole Occupy Wall Street movement and the banks and everything. And if that was in the subtext, then fair enough. Here, it's just forced. I know it serves a part in the plot to bankrupt Bruce Wayne, but to be fair, he was already bankrupt at the start of the film anyway. He'd let all his funds slip with Wayne Enterprises and he was in really bad way. So Bane's motivation here is completely irrelevant anyway.
But the one thing I will say that I thought this was nicely interwoven is that Bruce Wayne still has majority shares in his company, and he still has money there to keep those shares, even though he's wasted tons of it on a failed project. He still has stuff there to keep his shares. The plan that Daggett ensued with Bane was so that Daggett, to make Bruce Wayne bankrupt, and to have, and so he had to sell his shares in the company because he is the majority shareholder. He has the most stake in the company, and the plan was for Daggett to make it to Bane to attack the stock exchange so that Daggett can then buy Bruce Wayne's shares and make him the sole occupant of Wayne Enterprises. And I thought that was sort of nicely woven into the plot and into why he attacks the stock exchange.
Well, kind of, but then he later on he betrays Daggett anyway. So, and then it seems when he creates this revolution among the people, it was to turf out the rich people onto the streets, which again is the symbolism being heavy-handedly done, and for the poor to rise up. So that's why I thought that his grand scheme of things was to, bring the wealthy down to their level. I'm not sure. It just seems really... This is why I say it's inconsistent with his plans. I see what you mean, and you could definitely say that, but I'm just going by later on when he kills Daggett by, I don't know, snapping his face in half. I'm not quite sure how he kills him. Snaps his neck or something. And then he's just goes with this whole new motive.
See, I found that Bane, in terms of... because he talks very much about liberation and the liberating of Gotham. And that sort of comes in to play in the destruction aspect, because he leads people into falseness of having them take back the city so that it's easier for him to destroy it. And that's what it felt like to me, and that his idea of liberation is annihilation. And the whole thing with Daggett and how he kills Daggett is and that sort of symbolism, and why I found that he had ulterior motives to sort of help in Daggett so he could get to the stock exchange and sort of commence his uprising. That's what I felt. It was like he had ulterior motives, and that's what I found that I felt that he was trying to do. I mean, that the whole thing could be argued and debated, for as long as the film's out, but that to me is what he was trying to do and what I felt he was trying to do.
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, you say annihilation, but it just seems like a means to an end to me. He attacks the stock exchange, he bankrupts all the rich, so that then he can allow the poor to rise up and be his new army, but then that whole plot point of his army and revolution kind of is rendered irrelevant when the climax comes in and you find out his real motive. And that's why I just found it, inconsistent between his motives. But whatever. Anyway, Selina Kyle, and after like a small action scene, we get Batman and Selina Kyle pairing up, and she says that Bane is the mastermind behind it, and I'll take you to Bane, and I'll help you get to him. So they have this, what I thought was a really quite a cool scene where Batman and Catwoman are walking side by side through the underground system, and just like double teaming all these guards and stuff. I thought that was really cool. And then I have to admit I didn't see this coming, because I didn't know this is where this scene would be placed. Selina Kyle says, right, Bane's right in here, and she closes this metal gate down, trapping Batman inside with Bane waiting for him. And then you're like, oh, Catwoman, you devilish devil. And that's what I like about her character, because that is the epitome of her character. Sometimes she'll help Batman, sometimes she'll, go against Batman. And this is without doubt my favourite scene in this whole film. Where the problem lies is its placement in the film, because I thought this was going to be the very end of the film, and I think that would have been a much stronger ending if it had. This is the scene from Nightfall, if you've ever read that comic, where Bane and Batman have their epic fight, and the bat is broken. And this was directly from the comics, and I thought this scene was absolutely perfect. I don't think they could have done anything else to this scene to make it more perfect than it was. I thought that Bane shows off his physical prowess next to Batman, and but the problem is I didn't feel any tension in this scene. But if this had been saved for the end, I would have known, like, well, this scene hasn't come up yet, so there still might be building up to like who's going to go down. So I knew at this point that Batman was going to get his back broken, and even then I knew he wasn't going to die afterwards, because he'd already failed at this point. But we find out that Bane is the heir to the League of Shadows following Ra's al Ghul's death. And this is where the film starts to begin to feel more like Batman Begins than The Dark Knight. Certainly there are elements from The Dark Knight, such as the whole legacy of Harvey Dent, but to me this one feels a lot more closer to the plot and motives of the villains from Batman Begins.
Yeah. That whole fight, to me, that fight scene, I was sat in the cinema watching it thinking, ooh,
yeah,
Batman's literally getting a handful here. He cannot beat this. And it concludes with him, breaking his back. And that I felt like, oh wow, this guy means what he says and does what he means and stuff like that. And I felt very tense through that. And
so did I, but wouldn't you have felt more tense if that would have been at the very end of the film?
No,
you don't
because
know who's going to win.
it was well placed in terms of the themes, and the theme of Batman having to emotionally rise up to fight someone who is physically stronger than him. And I think that was well placed in terms of the themes and in terms of set pieces as well. That's my opinion on it. That it was a well placed scene that served the thematic material of it, of the film. But that's what I thought.
to me, great scene that it was, I would have preferred it at the end, because then you would have built up to this final confrontation, and the audience would. That's one of the drawing points that I went into this film like. Will Batman die? Will he be broken and die, or will he defeat Bane? And I think had that had been at the end, the audience would have genuinely have been on the edge of their seat, like seeing Batman just getting wailed on by Bane would have, just shocked the audience and like been rooting for Batman to succeed, because it is a perfectly done scene. But and even going back to your point about being a well-placed scene due to the themes that occur, this film is called The Dark Knight Rises, and I feel after this scene, after he's broken, Bane takes Bruce Wayne to a cell in I think it's the Middle East somewhere. This pit of despair, he calls it, and he's going to leave Batman in here to like be emotionally demoralised and beaten, and the only way out of this cell is to climb up this big tunnel towards the sky to get out the cell. And then the whole plot of the film just begins again. Bruce Wayne's character arc is just repeated from the very beginning of the film. Broken, trying to rise up to be Batman once again, and the first hour of this film outlines that, and then this whole second act of the film is exactly the same plot arc of he's broken in this cell and he's got to rise up to become Batman again and beat Bane. It was just repeated.
I didn't think it was repeated. I thought that yes, he was broken in the first act, but there was a sense there, as far as I'm concerned, where he didn't have to rise up. He felt like he could, just put on the suit and get back out there to fight crime, and and it's evident that he couldn't because of that Bane fight where he gets pummeled on. So that brings him to sort of realise I can't beat this until I find it in myself to add a new dimension to what I do, to who I am. Whereas I felt that he felt, to me, he felt like he could just put the suit on and go out and do it, kick ass again. That wasn't the case, and now it feels to me like he has to, that he thinks he needs to get strong. He needs to emotionally, mentally prepare, mentally and physically become stronger, rise above what he thought he was, rise above this whole lie that Gotham's been built around, rise above everything that he's done for Gotham and everything that he's become for Gotham, and he has to rise up to face this evil in Bane. And I think that was perfectly done, and it didn't detract, in terms of my view, that it didn't detract from the character arc of Batman that we saw at the beginning. I thought it added an extra dimension to his arc.
Yeah, I see what you mean, and I do like the part in the cell where he's in the cell. I just felt that I wish we'd have spent more time there, but to me it did render either the start or the middle part completely pointless, as he'd gone through the same arc. But I could take your point. And going back to the cell, Bane says you'll watch this TV, you'll watch me take over Gotham, you'll watch it plunge into chaos, and you can't do anything in here because you're trapped in a prison with a clear way out and no guards to patrol. And then, you'll never get out, and then you have my permission to die. And Bruce Wayne's left in this cell in the Middle East somewhere. And we hear from the other inmates that once there was a child who escaped from the cell during a riot there. And that apparently is the only person to ever escape this cell. This little child grew up, was born in this environment, and managed to escape. And that's all we hear is that. We get like little snippet. This plot point keeps being brought up throughout. And
yeah, but then I thought that was a good parallel, because it's hinted that this child is Bane.
Yeah, I thought it was Bane too.
And you know, that seems the case until we'll get there. But I thought it was a great parallel that yes, he was born into in this environment, and the child. It felt to me parallel between Bruce Wayne's current situation, because he has been the antithesis of good and justice, whereas this child has been brought up within violence and has had to. They've both had to rise above what they've been brought up with to achieve. And to achieve is to basically escape, and they've had to prepare themselves both mentally and physically. Of course, the child does it through the mental aspect, because, and it feels like it's paralleled, and he has to rise up above all the good he's done, whereas the child had to rise up above all the villainy that they saw in the prison, and rise up above that and go out, and because of everything he's seen, or everything they've seen, start to destroy.
But really, the only way they get out is he's told, don't use the rope. So that's really the only way he gets out. It's not much to do with the mental. It would have you believe it's like you have to be mentally stable to overcome it, but really all it boils down to is don't use the rope and just climb out. And that to me took away from Bane's menace when he puts Bruce Wayne in this situation. He puts him in a jail with no guards, a clear way out, and explains that someone has already escaped and it's possible to escape. And he rigs up this TV to like kind of break him emotionally, which, you know, Bruce Wayne keeps on and then ultimately just throws a rock at and turns it off anyway. So when Bane said you will watch this TV and, you know, be emotionally broken, Bruce could have just threw a stone at this TV to break the screen to turn it off, and Bane would have been like, oh damn, you know, well that screwed my plans over.
Well, I thought that Bruce was sort of he didn't. To me, it felt like he didn't know what Bane was going to do, and was sort of intrigued as to see how he was going to destroy his city. But then it got too far, and that's why he threw the rock at it, because he saw the destruction being caused and wanted to do something about it. But that's what it felt like to me.
And like the film, I think kind of here we have to leave Bruce Wayne for a long amount of time. You know, he's just in a cell at the minute, so most of the second act is mostly just exposition and plot. We go back to Bane in Gotham, who traps the Gotham police force underground, and this is the scene we see from, you know, the trailers, the football game. And if we hadn't have seen that part in the trailer, I think that this scene would have carried a lot more tension, because we knew how it was going to end. We knew that Bane was going to blow up this stadium. Had we not seen that, I think this would have carried a lot more tension. You know, this little kid singing the American national anthem, and it's all quiet, and Bane's getting ready in position to walk out onto the field and blow it up. And then he blows at the field, which, yes, looks really cool and is well done. I believe it was CGI. I can't see them blowing up a real field in that fashion.
But it seemed like it was the visual effects were added to enhance the already sort of practical because there was that 13-minute preview which showed that there was things that basically showed that they'd built sort of another layer to the ground, and they started blowing that up. It wasn't as big, but that was what the special effects guys went, all right, okay, we'll use that, and then we'll add things to it.
Right.
So it's sort of practical and special effects, visual effects, sort of meshed into one.
Okay. And then Bane comes out with Dr. Pavlov, I can't remember, I think it's Pavlov, and says, we have... It's the energy reactor that we talked about at the start that was so obviously not a doomsday weapon. He says, this is rigged to blow. I have the detonator. No, one of you here has the detonator in this stadium. And should any of you attempt to escape, it will blow up. So you've all got to stay here. And, we'll hold the city to ransom. And he breaks Dr. Pavlov's neck because he's the only one who could disable the nuclear bomb, and then all of a sudden he breaks into this speech about wanting to get an army together in Gotham to rise up against the rich, and he reads the speech that Commissioner Gordon had written earlier on in the film telling the truth about Harvey Dent, and this immediately just breaks everyone's emotions, and they all just willingly join Bane's cause. He's held up a football stadium with thousands of people. He's blew up large portions of the city. He's blew up all the bridges leading into the city, and he's quite openly gunning down anyone who tries to come and rescue the police that are trapped, or the survivors in the football game. And yet everyone seems to just willingly join his cause, oh yeah, we don't like the rich people, let's just join this madman with a nuclear bomb. And that to me just, it didn't ring true, compared to that these people had been good for so long to just join this willingly join this crazy masked man with a bomb.
No, I didn't think so.
And
I thought that it was necessary. And I thought it was necessary because basically those 8 years have been a lie, and that piece has been a lie in Gotham, and I thought that okay, it may have been exaggerated, but people wouldn't be happy about it.
I understand the prisoners being released because they were falsely imprisoned on the Dent Act, a false charge with no hope for parole. I understand that. What I didn't understand was all the civilians just walking out of their homes, ripping rich people out of their mansions, destroying their apartments, helping to gun down any person who didn't conform to this new way of thinking. And Bane's plan was Karl Marx. I am calling it. Bane was a communist. And that was... I had a lot of fun in the cinema just making Karl Marx jokes and about communism with Bane. But then again, this is where his methods go skewed, because we find out that he's the heir, well, seemingly at this point, the heir to Ra's al Ghul's destiny. And he needs to, destroy Gotham to get rid of all crime and despair from the world. But I was like, it's peacetime. It's been 8 years of peace and no crime. Why have you got to destroy it? When it was in Batman Begins, fair enough, it was extreme, but fair enough that, the city was evidently, crime-ridden. But here it was peacetime, so why did he still see the need that he had to destroy Gotham? And even so, here, what is the point in building up this whole revolutionary army when we find out quite openly that he plans to destroy the city anyway? Why didn't he just destroy it right from the off? And that's why I don't think Baines is as compelling villain compared to the other ones, because the other ones were written so tightly. I mean, you had Ra's al Ghul, who tied in with the Scarecrow, and his plot made sense. Joker's pure anarchy, you know, to test Batman, made sense. Here, I still don't know what Bane's plot was. If it was to carry on Ra's al Ghul's legacy, then he should have just blew that bomb up straight away, because he seemed quite happy to die for his cause, and certainly all his followers did. But the whole second act, which goes on for ages and does really drag on a second viewing, is just rendered completely pointless to have some action set pieces in the middle. There was no need for him to build up this army when ultimately he was going to destroy the city anyway. I mean, he sets it onto a time bomb setting, which I believe is for 5 months before the core of the bomb decays and becomes unstable. So he just buys his time for 5 months, just building up this army when that's ultimately not going to come to a head. And that's why I didn't really much care for Bane's motives.
Okay. Well, going back to the Harvey Dent, he reads the letter. I think that it had a great impact on John Blake as a character, and his sort of and the way he looks up to Gordon has now been broken by what essentially was a lie. And I thought that was a great. They had a scene where Gordon tries to not explain to it. It felt to me like Gordon wasn't trying to explain to John Blake what he was
trying
did.
To justify it.
He was trying to explain to himself why he did why he basically lied about Harvey Dent.
And while that was quite a good dynamic, the problem is that right after that scene, they just seem pally again. I mean, in that scene, what you just said, John Blake does seem to almost hate Commissioner Gordon at this point, because he only found about this now, and he hates Gordon for covering this thing up. But yet, straight after that scene, he seems quite pally with him, and he's working with him again.
Yeah, but they are in a situation where they can't escape the city, and the police are essentially being hunted down, or the remainders of it are being hunted down. So I mean, he has to overcome that to work with Gordon and sort of come out of the situation on top.
I suppose, but I mean, you would have still seen some kind of disdain or hatred amongst the two characters, even though they're working together. You would have still seen some kind of element between them as characters, but to me that just seemed to be dropped like so many other plot points in this film. And it's around about this point in the film as well where loads of other characters just dropped. Catwoman just never resurfaces until the very end. We hardly get any cutbacks to Christian Bale, Bruce Wayne in the cell. This part seems to be really focused on plot and just this part seems to be really focused on the police side of it, the Commissioner Gordon and Joseph Gordon-Levitt side. And to me, that this is the part where the film really dragged. It's about an hour to 45 minutes of just pure talking. And
I didn't think so. I thought that perhaps you needed that to establish what was going on in Gotham and how everyone was reacting.
But that's exactly what it is. It seems too much exposition to show oh, this is happening and this is happening, and oh, we'll have to jump to this character quickly to show what they're doing and how they're coping, and then oh, we've got to go over to this character. And I think there was too many characters in this film, and I don't think the film did a very good job of juggling between them all, and some were neglected screen time. I think they could have cut a few characters out of it, perhaps, and keep it a bit more focused, and that's That's why, to me, this is the weakest of the three, because it didn't focus on the title character who should be the main character, Bruce Wayne, Batman. And that, to me, is why it didn't work, especially the second act. And I mean, it's around this point as well that we have... Oh, this really irritated me in the film. We have these mock trials, like, set up with Bane, who's judging all these rich people and the citizens of Gotham. And who's the judge? Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow. And...
See, I loved that. I thought it was it's pretty great.
That was pandering to, you know... I mean, he came back for Dark Knight and was used in it for about 2 minutes, and you know what, I didn't mind that because it followed on from Begins. Here, it was just forced. And there is no reason why Jonathan Crane would be a judge, even if it is a mock trial. There is no reason he would act in that role. He was a doctor of psychopharmacology and fear gas, and the whole element of being a judge in a trial has no bearing on his character whatsoever. And I mean, he doesn't even dress as the Scarecrow in this. He is just Jonathan Crane being a judge. Now, had Heath Ledger have survived, like, still been alive, would they have used the Joker in this position? I think...
I think what the original plan might have been was to bring him back. If Heath Ledger had, you know, not died making The Dark Knight, I think that would have been the original plan. To bring him back for
I
this
can see
final
a villain
one.
like the Joker suiting this role a lot more, like dressed as a judge and sentencing all the rich to, you know, exile. Or, I tell you, who would have been perfect would have been Two-Face, you know, the lawman, but he's suffering from a bad case of death in this series. But to me, that was just really forced, didn't need to be in the film, and it just irritated me, that one part. I know it's a small gripe to be annoyed over, but, you know, it is what it is. And they're basically sending people out onto the ice, like, the lake's frozen because it's winter time, and they're sending people to exile, and if they walk across the ice then they're free to go, but law of averages, they're going to break through the weak ice and, you know, die. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, is Mr. Freeze going to be in this film? When I saw all the lake frozen up, I thought, has Schwarzenegger come back?
No.
So yeah, we Bane's basically blowing up the city. He's blew up the stadium. He's blew up the bridges into Gotham. There is no way into the city. It's all been like isolated for his great plan to like take effect. Now I think we really have to cut back to Batman, who the inmate. There's a doctor amongst the inmates, which was convenient, and he says that his vertebrae is like. He's got like a compound fracture in his back, like the spine is sticking out of his back. And like the magic knee brace, this is resolved so quickly, it's just popped back into his, you know, into his back, the bone. And he loops this rope around him and just leaves him like slumping down. Nothing about infection or anything, how long this bone has been exposed. And the travel from Gotham to the middle of nowhere in the Middle East. And we have one flashback, well, kind of vision of Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, which I actually thought was pretty cool. And then the next scene, he's doing crunches, he's doing sit-ups, you know, he's doing all kinds of workouts, and I'm like, dude, if you had your spine sticking out of your back, that would take months to recover from. Not just immediately, you know, doing sit-ups and crunches. And then, you know, he goes...
But maybe it was. You know, I'd just like to take it back to the Liam Neeson thing, where Liam Neeson comes back in. He's there for a flashback. Or he's there for a vision of Bruce. And what he says is essentially, you know, we were going to come back anyway. You can't stop us, you're weak, you're you can't do anything to stop this. It's sort of it seems as though Bruce is sort of having doubts about what he can physically do or how he can physically beat Bane and beat the sort of legacy of the League of Shadows, and that's where I think his doubts form the representation of Ra's al Ghul to sort of be this catalyst to his motivation of getting out of the prison, which I thought worked really.
And also
really
here
well.
we get more flashbacks to that child that escaped, and at this point it's said that Bane is Ra's al Ghul's son, and Ra's al Ghul was a mercenary, and that's the part in Batman Begins where he says, you know, I had a wife, she was taken from me. I can't really remember the backstories. It's been a while, you know. I forgot most of the things that happened in the film, but didn't he like fall in love with this woman who he got pregnant, and then instead of him being taken to the pit for causing such outrage, she took his place and went to the pit, and that's where she had, well, at this point we think it's Bane. I think the story was something like that, and Bruce Wayne realizes this.
But the backstory in Batman Begins, he says, "I had a wife and a daughter."
No, he just says wife in Batman Begins.
No, does he? I swear he said he had a wife and he had a wife and child.
No, he just says wife in Batman Begins. He says, I had a wife, my great love, she was taken from me. But that's why I thought, when I watched Batman Begins, like, well, if they ever do bring in his daughter, why didn't he say that there? But no, he just says wife in Batman Begins.
Oh, I thought he said more than that. That's testament to how it's been a while since I've seen it. But, alright, okay. Well. So
then, Bruce Wayne, you know, digs deep mentally, physically, doesn't use the rope to get out. And as he's climbing, you know, the music's building, the chant's building. And then, I'm not sure what to make of this part. As he's climbing up, he kind of falters, and there's a crack in the wall of this tunnel that he's climbing up, and all bats pour out of it. And, you know, whilst it's cool, and it signifies that Batman's come back, although he already did at the start of the film, it's quite a...
Not in that sort of sense.
It's quite a cool scene, but the symbolism is so forced in that scene. Like, bats pouring out at that precise moment that he's climbing up, surrounding him, swarming him in similar fashion to what happened in Batman Begins, and... I don't know, that just seemed a bit too forced in my opinion. But not as forced as another bit of symbolism that comes up. So Batman climbs out of the pit, Bruce Wayne, and he walks back to Gotham, I guess. He kind of just gets out of this pit in the middle of nowhere and just starts walking towards these slums. And I don't know how he got back to Gotham. He walked apparently.
I don't think he walked. I mean, I think it's assumed that he found a way other than...
But that also raises the question, how would he even get back to Gotham? Because Bane blew out all the bridges and stopped any kind of, you know, flights over Gotham. He completely isolated the city. So there would be no physical way for him to get back into the city.
Maybe submarine, or he jumped out of a plane. I don't know, but I assume that he does
and then,
get back. A way other than walking, swim.
You know, and then then we come back to Catwoman after like ages of not seeing her, Selina Kyle, and then you know, Bruce Wayne just walks up. He's like, oh yeah. You know, I totally magically found you in the middle of this city. I knew you would be in this precise location. And then he enlists her help, even though she was the one that locked him in the room and got his back broken in the first place. So why he suddenly still likes her, I have no idea. and then basically he's got to try and liberate the city, and he's got to stop this bomb from going off. So, he enlists the help of, all the characters, Lucius Fox, Miranda Tate, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Gordon, everyone, and we find out that the bomb is locked in one of these massive armoured trucks, but the problem is there's 3 trucks, and 2 of which are decoys, so they have to try and go and track all the trucks to find out which one contains the bomb.
And that's sort of what the police had been doing before Batman showed up. They'd been tracking the bomb, sort of not really knowing what they're going to do once they find the car that's got the bomb in, or how they're going to disarm it, just sort of tracking it. That's what they were doing before Batman showed up, and they sort of left these sort of little Batman marks, or the Bat Signal marks on the
is it like the routes? They were like plotting the routes.
What was it? On like the roads and things. So they know the marks. So
then Batman basically rallies all the police together, and that's his army. And obviously Bane's got his army of all the people that have risen up from Gotham to join his cause. And then that's the scene in the trailer, like where all the police and the regular civilians are charging at each other. So while this is going on, Batman rocks up and then starts another fight with Bane. And it suffers from this cliche where if they've already had a confrontation, the villain is automatically weaker than he was before, and the fight's over in like a minute. And it was at this point where I was like, I am not invested in this fight at all. I'm not excited. I know how it's going to end. If that previous fight had been at the ending, I would genuinely be tense right now. But and he like slashes Bane's mask, like it turns out it's like a painkiller or some kind of breathing apparatus that he's got on his face. And then just as he's like yelling at him in his typical Batman voice to like, where's the detonator to, blow up the bomb because he needs to disable it, he is stabbed by someone. And he turns round, and who is it? It's Miranda Tate, Marion Cotillard's character, who turns out to be Talia al Ghul. And if anyone was following the basic theories that were coming up before the film came out, we all knew this is how it was going to end. We all knew that her character there was gonna be more to her than there was. So, I wasn't shocked at that revelation. I don't know if you were.
I wasn't, but I liked it. And this is something I wanted to get into, in terms of the relationship you brought up with him and Bruce, with her and Bruce. Basically, what I thought was that Miranda Tate, Talia al Ghul, was sort of wanting to get near this bomb, or near this device that could, finish her father's work, finish his symbol, his legacy. And what I thought, or what came through for me, was that it keeps saying she. It seemed to me that she wanted to get Bruce into a position of trust, and I thought when the reveal happened, I thought sitting there that, oh yeah, okay, this works. This works for the things we've seen, because she gets into Bruce's head, not necessarily that much, but gets in enough for him to begin to trust her, begin to lead him into a full sense of security around her, and give her access to this contraption. And I thought, when the revelation happened, that it worked. I thought I could see that. Looking back, I can see what she was trying to do, and I thought that the revelation A worked, and B was sort of wasn't much of a shock, but it did sort of get me thinking about the character. And I also want to bring up the flashbacks, because this is where I don't have a problem with it, but I can see that people might. Where the flashbacks of her, after that's revealed, you could argue that the flashbacks sort of become a bit messy and sort of don't really make much sense. But and it's revealed that Bane really was the one that saved her from the pit, and that the two of them have a sort of bond, and that she rose from the ashes.
Yeah, she was the kid that climbed out.
Yeah, she was the kid that climbed out. She rose above everything in there, and she found her father, who wouldn't really let Bane in, because I imagine he was frightened of what he would ultimately turn into, or saw what he was capable of. Even for Ra's al Ghul, maybe he thought he was a bit too extreme, wanting this whole destruction thing, or annihilation, rather. So he exiles him.
Yeah.
And to me, I can see where people might come from, when they say yes, it might have made everything sort of previously sort of meaningless, and sort of, okay, what's really going on? But I found it for the most part worked, and I thought it added more to her character than it did Bane's, and I think we get more. I don't think that really the flashbacks of Bane, if we were to assume it was Bane, needed to be there in order for us to know about his character. But I thought it worked for the most part, in sort of tying her into the story.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was one twist too many, perhaps. Like, maybe if Talia al Ghul hadn't have been in this film and it had have just been Bane, I still think the flashbacks would have worked, because that was one thing when I was watching the film, because the whole point of Bane's backstory in the comics is that he grew up as a kid in this cell which was horrible, and he was like lived a life of suffering, and then he eventually escaped, and obviously that has the whole Venom side of it, but that's not in this film. So when I saw that, I was really pleasantly surprised that they kept that aspect of the character. However, then it's revealed at the end that it wasn't Bane and it was Talia al Ghul was the kid, and I don't know how I felt by it, 'cause it still worked for her character, and I guess it was an okay twist. Even like I expected Talia al Ghul to come up into it, but I didn't expect that was going to be her as a child. Going back to what you said about her motives, though, and the whole relationship with Bruce Wayne, there's one scene where she sleeps together with Bruce Wayne, and after that, even later on, they never speak of this again. Bruce Wayne never speaks of this again, or seems to have any attachment to this. So was it just like a kind of one-night stand that they just agreed upon? And even so, he gives her full ability to work with this energy reactor, and gives her all control over its development. So why didn't she just turn it on then? And even when she's like having to scan like the panel when Bane's like got the bomb, surely she could have just turned traitor then and revealed who she was and worked with Bane and just detonated it right then, because that's ultimately what she wants to achieve. So why did she have to wait until the last 10 minutes of the film to do this? It's the same thing with Bane wanted to pursue this legacy as well, and he didn't set the bomb off. And to me, Talia al Ghul as a villain is revealed too late on in the film. So by the time she is, we don't really care about her character or her motives. And she seems to suffer from Venom syndrome from Spider-Man 3. And he's just this big villain who's just revealed for the final action sequence. And her character's just basically reduced to driving a truck. And that's what I mean, like, the motives of the villains in this film aren't clearly defined. Or even when they are, you go back and it just breaks down in when you think about all the times they could have achieved their goal.
Yeah.
Like, Ra's al Ghul did attempt to destroy the city, but first he needed that microwave emitter. And when he did, he came back to Gotham and he activated it and, you know, he was trying to destroy it. Here, she had complete control of the nuclear bomb. Even after Dr. Pavlo had, you know, been killed and it was activated, she had complete control over it at Wayne Enterprises, and I just don't get why she didn't detonate it anyway. But anyway, we need our action climax. So Talia al Ghul stabs Batman and goes to detonate this bomb, and Bane then has another little fight with Batman, and then right when you think that Batman's gonna die, Catwoman rolls in on the Batpod and shoots Bane, kills him. Anticlimactic ending to Bane. He's just gone. And then after that, you think that Batman's going to die from the knife stab. Completely shrugs it off afterwards. Doesn't even clutch his side. Doesn't wince in pain. Doesn't hobble or anything. He just carries on. Just disregards this slowly, like, you know, this knife that's just slowly been pushed into his abdomen. And then it just resorts to generic action climax, and by this time I was just looking at my watch like, I'm not invested in this ending at all. It's formulaic, it's generic, it's turned into a scene from a video game with the bat flying round and dodging missiles and blowing up into buildings. And then Batman is shooting at the truck that Talia al Ghul is driving, which has the nuclear bomb in. So that seems really smart, Batman, to shoot at a truck with a bomb in when you want to try and defuse it. And to me, it was from this point onwards where the ending just completely fell apart. I don't know if you feel the same way or...
I didn't. I didn't think the ending sort of felt formulaic. I know that could be said for it, but I did feel myself invested in it, and especially in terms of him trying to. I think it was more he was shooting at the ground so that they'd lure them to, because there was the whole plot point about getting the bomb back into Wayne Enterprises so that they could reinstall it into the generator so that the reactor would stabilise. That was what I thought he was shooting, to sort of divert her towards Wayne Enterprises, but it doesn't work. And then what you get is the thing where the Talia al Ghul is then sort of, I suppose, killed when she drives off like a ledge and hits the floor. Then you get, which I thought was quite a nice thing, where Gordon is in the truck because he had to plant this thing so that Batman could track it in the Batpod. So so Gordon gets out, and there was a thing before with Jonathan Blake where he said, "Don't you want to know who he is?" And whilst Gordon sort of is intrigued by the concept of who Batman is, it feels to me in this scene he asks who he is, and Batman doesn't give a clear answer, but he tells Gordon in a way that he will know. He references the scene in Batman Begins where Gordon puts the jacket around a young Bruce Wayne after his parents were killed. It was a very nicely done scene for that, but I think what hindered it from being that was the line that comes after both those bits, which is like Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, I agree.
Sort of like that. You know, that's probably where I one of the problems I had with it. I've got two problems with it, and I'll get into another one sort of in a minute. But that's where I felt that you didn't need that. You could just look at the expression on his face, and that says it all.
Yeah. So sometimes
actions
less is more.
speak louder than words.
Yeah, exactly. I think if he'd have found this out in silent realization, it would have been a lot more powerful scene. Because when he just goes, Bruce Wayne, it kind of is like, thank you, Captain Obvious. I agree with that point.
Yeah.
But also, going back to Talia al Ghul, before she dies, she says that she's flooded the chamber with because Morgan Freeman's character, Lucius Fox, is in there, and she floods the chamber. How did he get out of that? Did I miss that part? Because he kind of climbs that ladder where all the water's rising up, and we never see how he gets out of there. We know he survives because we see him at the end. Was there a scene where we see him get out?
There seems to be, I think, that the ladder was there for that sort of situation, or that escape, in case the thing flooded and there was people in there, that was an escape route for them.
Right.
That's what it felt like to me.
And anyway, but apparently Talia Ghul says that the bomb can't be stopped. The bomb's still going to go off no matter what. It can't be disabled. So Batman turns to Gordon, says that line we just said, gets into the bat plane and airlifts the bomb out of the city as the music becomes very sad and somber and goes into slow motion as Batman drives into the sunset with this bomb, and it blows up in a gigantic mushroom cloud, and Batman sacrificed himself to save Gotham. And I thought, oh, okay, that they've had the balls to, kill Batman off, but then I was like, oh, hang on a minute. Will they just chicken out of it? And the ending. The ending is what completely infuriated me in this film, and what made me storm out the cinema in absolute disgust and anger. They pretend that they've killed Batman off, and they build a statue. Everyone believes he's dead. They build a statue to him, and it's all well and good. And then the film ends where it goes back to Michael Caine's character Alfred, and he stares at the graves of both Bruce Wayne, Martha Wayne, and Thomas Wayne, and he breaks down, and that's a very moving scene. He just breaks down, and he's just
that was the scene for me, which sort of told me that Michael Caine is actually an actor and not this sort of monotone presence on screen. That was sort of the scene that cemented that for me, and he really does do a very good job of that. And he says, I fail. I couldn't protect it.
And then it ends where he goes on holiday to the place we said at the start in Italy, and he sits at a cafe. He orders a drink. He looks over at another table, and who's on the table but both Bruce Wayne, who's now settled down, with Selina Kyle. And if Alfred did genuinely believe that Bruce Wayne had died, why didn't he just look wide-eyed and gasp and just burst into tears or seem shocked in any way? He seemed to know that that he was still alive. So was
I didn't really think so. I thought that he sort of there was an element of surprise, but also of sort of glee and happiness in there that, you know, because that sort of, I suppose Alfred went there because
he was in hope.
He's reminiscing. Yeah. He's sort of, he doesn't want to move on because it sort of, I suppose it parallels how Bruce felt at the beginning of the film. That this one scene shows you that Alfred, for all he was trying to do to get Bruce out of that being Batman, that he can't bring himself to move on with his own life and do something else. So he has to go back to where he thought, to the place the cafe, in the hope that he might see.
But he wouldn't
Bruce
expect to see Bruce again. That's the point. I mean, he saw the grave, Bruce Wayne buried, and just to look over, see him, and he literally doesn't act shocked or anything. He literally just looks over, smiles, and like nods his head to him. And that is so unrealistic an action. He would have just burst into tears or just like, or nearly fell off his chair in realisation that the person who he saw buried is in fact alive and well. And maybe we know Christopher Nolan, maybe it's Inception, maybe this was all in Alfred's head and he was expecting to see Bruce Wayne there in hope that he was still alive, and this is the vision that he hopes to see. Maybe that's the ending, but no, he's still alive and he's settled down with Selina Kyle. And did those characters even have a thing? Like, I know they had that flirtatious relationship, but it didn't seem like this is the person that Bruce Wayne will settle down and spend the rest of his life with in true love. I mean, she betrayed him at every given moment. She stole, she pickpocketed him at every given moment. And although there was that flirtatious dimension, she didn't seem like she was the person to settle down, and neither did Bruce Wayne with her. So I didn't buy that aspect of it either. I don't know if you felt the same way, or...
I thought this was a fitting ending. This actual, how the film ends, I thought it was a good way to end the film, and I thought it was a fitting way to end the film. I mean, yes, you could argue that Alfred's reactions weren't natural, but I personally thought they were, and you could see in his eyes that yes, he was surprised by that. But I thought that the ending to this I thought was very good. It
just fell apart to me, and also in the ending, we find out that Bruce Wayne has left Wayne Mansion completely to Alfred, and that it is now a home for orphan children, which I actually thought was quite a nice aspect to it, and it shows that he did take to heart what John Blake said in their first scene together. And then we get on to John Blake's segments of the ending, and Bruce Wayne has left something to John Blake in his will, and it turns out to be coordinates to the Batcave. And as he's collecting this package, this woman says, I can't find any package delivered to John Blake. And he says, oh, try my legal name. And she finds it and she says, you should use your real name more often. I like it. Robin. And in the cinema, I just face palmed. I was like, no. Nolan, you and Christian Bale said that if Robin had any involvement in this film or was even referenced, you weren't going to do it. You just weren't. It was going to be focused on Batman. But you had to put that in there, didn't you? You couldn't have just said, like, I like your real name, Richard Grayson, or Tim Drake or something. You had to just hit it on the head and say Robin, and that just really irritated me. That just put me in a vile mood throughout the rest of the ending. And then the film ends where John Blake gets into the Batcave and he rises up on this platform, and I don't know whether he's going to take up the mantle of a new Batman or take up the mantle of a new hero Robin, we don't know. We're not getting any more films in Nolan's franchise, and the film ends there on a really bittersweet note of. I hated this ending. I hated it. I hated everything about this ending. And I know you don't feel the same way, but I know your thoughts towards the character of Robin. Didn't you feel the same way at all about that?
I didn't. No, because I liked John Blake as a character.
I did too, but I just thought Robin was just. I just thought that ruined it. The concept of Robin in this series, so far. Especially when he never came into play as a Robin. They just threw that reference in there in like the last minute of the film, and I just didn't think it was necessary.
I hear, but I mean, I found it sort of a good reference and then enjoy a fun reference as well, and that's what I thought.
Oh, I completely forgot another point about this film, and it's after Commissioner Gordon is exiled by Cillian Murphy and is sent to walk across the ice. Batman comes down, and Commissioner Gordon finds a flare, and he lifts it up, and Batman says, "Light it up." So he lights it, he throws it on the ice, and it creates an oil trail that sets on fire all across the ice, all up the side of a building, and sets fire to this big flaming Batman symbol. And it's like, when did Batman ever have the time to do that? He could have done anything in that time. He could have saved Commissioner Gordon, he could have attempted to save the police under the underground, but he was like, no, this is going to look so cool once it's lit up. And did he hover in his bat plane and paint an oil bat symbol on the side of this building, and then plant the flare on the ice, knowing that Commissioner Gordon would be there to light it up, and it would create this trail?
Okay, I mean, I think that's all superficial, and the point of it was not doesn't matter how he did it or why or what he did it with. I think the point of that was to make, sort of get the people of Gotham knowing that he's back. It was short, it was done well, and I thought it did its job, and I thought it was symbolic in the sense that hope has returned. Gotham's saviour has returned. I know that, but I just didn't get the logistics of it and the concept of Batman wasting hours of time painting this Batman symbol on top of this skyscraper for just a cool reveal. It didn't seem to me something that Batman would do. But that's me, you know. That's my opinion on that scene. I didn't like it. I just thought it would have been better if Batman had just shown up, you know. But I guess we needed a cool reveal. So yeah. One thing I want to point out now. I had two problems with the film. One was that Jim Gordon scene where he said, "Bruce Wayne." Duh. Bruce Wayne, sort of that. Another one was the use of flashbacks. Fine, if you're gonna have flashbacks in, okay, fine. But some of them were done well. Others were kind of. It felt like my intelligence towards the previous, what happened in the previous films was being tested. I think not. It wasn't all the flashbacks. Don't get me wrong. Some of them worked really well.
Like the "Why do we fall?" scene.
Yeah, like all the like the flashback to Bruce's when he falls into the pit at the beginning of Batman Begins, and his dad says, "Why do we fall?" That worked. Some of them didn't work. Like there's a moment in there where Gordon reads out the speech, and there's the truth of Harvey Dent, where Harvey Dent, where there's a flashback to what Harvey Dent has done, and I sort of thought, well, you know, you kind of, I think you kind of had to leave it up to the audience to sort of remember what happened in your films, because I mean, Nolan's a smarter director than that. That he thinks the audience has some, or has an semblance of intelligence, unlike Michael Bay with his Transformers trilogy. But I just felt that, you know, he didn't trust us to remember what happened in the previous film, so he had to give us those flashbacks, and I didn't think it worked. Some, like, of course, some of them worked, and others.
Well, I agree with that, especially what you said with the whole short flashbacks to Two-Face at the start. I mean, if you're going to see this film, you're kind of going in with the intention that you've seen the other two, or at least the previous one.
Yeah.
And I did think that was kind of insulting the audience's intelligence a little bit. As we said, not all of them. You know, some of them were nice, some of them were, and helped to like cement it as the final one in the trilogy. But yeah, some of them were just forced. So, following that, I kind of guess we have to go on final thoughts of the film.
Okay.
So,
final thoughts.
You can start off with your final thoughts.
I'll start off with my final thoughts. I thought this was a fitting. From the two problems I had, I thought, putting those aside, this was a really good sort of summer blockbuster that was a fitting conclusion, an epic conclusion to the end of Christopher Nolan's Batman. And I loved it. I walked out of the cinema feeling great, feeling like, yes, I've witnessed in my lifetime a perfect trilogy. And that's what I felt coming out of the cinema. I felt a feeling of, right, okay, I can sit back and I can relax. He's done it. He has physically done what Tim Burton couldn't, or what Joel Schumacher couldn't, and he's done it. He's made Batman. He has done Batman right. And that is what I came out of the cinema thinking.
Right.
I loved it.
You see, this is where it's awkward for me to recommend this film. Like, do I recommend this film? As a film, you know, it's well shot, it's well directed, but the plot is a mess and the characters are a mess. And I can't believe I'm saying this about a Christopher Nolan film, because you look at his other two and they're so tightly written. And yes, they have their problems, but as films and as superhero films, certainly, I think that they lifted the bar for superhero films and really gave it that edge of, like, setting it in a realistic world and with moral issues. But here, I think it was the plot that weakened the film, and I think that they were juggling with way too many characters, so that some characters you like might not get the screen time they deserve. And it's a Batman film. The Dark Knight Rises, and Batman is hardly in this film. I think he's in about 3 scenes. He shows up 40 minutes in, 50 minutes in, is his first appearance, and then we have, you know, the fight with Bane is his second appearance, and then he doesn't show up again until like the last 10 minutes of the film. And to me, that really hurt the film. And to me, it's probably Christopher Nolan's weakest film. I didn't really much care for Insomnia, but I can't believe I'm saying this, like, to me it resorted to the typical thing of the third one being the weakest. You know, as a film it's okay, but I went into this being severely disappointed on the way out. And would I recommend this film? Yes. If you're a Batman fan, you're going to go and see this film anyway. You know, you've probably already seen it by now anyway. But if you really liked Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, I think you're going to be very disappointed with this film. And in fact, I would also go as far as to not recommend it, in the sense that I would leave it off where Dark Knight ended. If you really liked the other two that much, really let down. More let down by this than I was Prometheus, because, you know, this was my most anticipated film of the year, and I was sorely let down by it. And that's such a shame to say that about what could have been the best part of an amazing, you know, series. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's we both have different opinions on it, and you know, I would recommend it. I would thoroughly recommend it, and I'm going to see it more than twice because I enjoyed it that much. So yeah, that is the long-awaited Dark Knight Rises after our Bat Marathon. So, you know,
where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Well, that is to be decided. So that has been our Dark Knight Rises review, our breakdown. So I hope you've enjoyed it and enjoyed both our opinions on it. So join us next time for our next review, and you know, keep looking on the YouTube page for sort of updates, for individual reviews, for individual game reviews, and general video logs and things like that. And subscribe, rate and comment and all the usual stuff. So thanks very much, guys, for joining us this time, and we'll see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.